Hey guys, this is Backdraft and welcome to another Redstone showcase. In this showcase, I'm going to show you my design for an AFK Nether Star farm. So the 5-second synopsis of what this does, essentially the player will AFK sit right here and place soul sand right here in front of this piston. That piston will shoot the soul sand across over to here, and this contraption here essentially will spawn a wither. The wither will then get trapped in the bedrock and then die from entity cramming damage from these minecarts right here. So to demonstrate what happens really quickly, we're going to be sitting over here where we're going to be putting the soul sand in front of this piston. When we place it, it is immediately dispensed forward. As soon as it reaches the end, the soul sand is placed into the design that you need to spawn a wither. Wither skeleton skulls are dispensed out through these dispensers here, and the wither will spawn. So after the wither explodes, essentially it's going to be taking a tiny bit of damage from shooting itself with its own rockets. It's also going to be taking the majority of the damage from the entity cramming. It takes about 30 to 35 seconds for the wither to die. So once the wither does die, we have a hopper minecart trapped in this block right here that will take the nether star and dispense it into this barrel down here. So I've been toying around with the idea for another star farm for quite some time now, and I did some research to see what else was out there. I did find a really good tutorial video by Shokercraft that shows a similar design to this. That is where I drew inspiration for this farm, especially the idea that you can kill the wither using entity cramming with minecarts. There are a couple changes that I made, however. I think it's time to explain the redstone. So it's time to get technical. I apologize if I lose you guys, but I will do the best that I can to explain this as simply as possible. So essentially the soul sand is dispensed out from this piston right here, as I showed before. Once it reaches the end, the last piece of soul sand will stop right here, activating this observer. Now this observer is connected up to a piston with an observer on the face, a sticky piston I should say, that will shoot the observer forward and pulse this redstone line right here. Now this redstone line then does a few different things. The first thing it's going to do is activate this piston, which will take the soul sand from over here and pull it to right here. The next thing that's going to happen, we have to go underneath to explain that, is this redstone line will then kick in. Now this redstone line is connected to a clock, and what that clock will do is then activate this double piston extender. So when the clock activates, it will activate this piston right here, which will push this redstone block and activate the double piston extender. So the first thing the double piston extender will do is it will push the soul sand block over to this observer right here. Now you're probably wondering why I have the double piston extender connected to a clock. Well, that's so there is time to spawn the wither. Essentially, there's time to dispense the wither skeleton skulls. Because if this double piston extender goes back too quickly before the wither skeleton skulls have a chance to pop up, it could potentially pull that piece of soul sand back, and then the whole thing breaks. So there's 5 items in this clock here, meaning we have about a 2.5 second delay, which is enough time to dispense the wither skeleton skulls and spawn the wither before the double piston extender retracts. So when the soul sand reaches this observer right here, that will activate this redstone line, which comes from directly underneath that observer, which will then activate these pistons. The pistons will push the soul sand into place directly underneath the center of the bedrock, and then the dispensers will activate, dispensing the wither skeleton skulls, and we have successfully spawned a wither. Now over at the AFK spot, there's a couple more things to note. The first thing is this dispenser system right here with the chest. The chest is where you're going to put all of your soul sand. Now this dispenser right here will constantly drop the soul sand behind the player. So the idea is to have the player stand right here. Now, if you haven't figured it out already, essentially what we're doing is we're making sure that the player's inventory is constantly filled up with soul sand. Now, the way we have this set up is essentially a lossless dropper system. So what happens is the soul sand gets dropped right here, and it doesn't leave this 1 block space, essentially just chills on top of this hopper right here. Now, this hopper feeds directly into a dropper that's underneath this one right here. There's a second one down there that feeds directly upwards into this dropper up top. So essentially what happens is when the soul sand gets dispensed on top of this hopper, the mechanics of hoppers dictate that an item on top of the hopper will get sucked in before items from the sides. So the soul sand coming from the chest doesn't get prioritized. The soul sand that's already on top of the hopper from the dropper does get prioritized, essentially creating a lossless system so that the soul sand will never despawn. So the player will AFK right here, which is just enough distance away for them to place the soul sand in front of the piston. Now, the reason that we're this far away from the actual contraption is so that the player is not affected by the explosion from the wither. So in the shulkercraft design, the player is actually close enough to the wither that they are affected by the explosion. Now, you can overcome this by setting up a couple beacons with resistance and regeneration like I have here, and maybe some blast protection armor, but I've done a lot of testing with this farm and done a lot of AFK, and I did notice that sometimes it is extremely rare, but sometimes you will take a half a heart of damage every now and then, which will slowly deplete your hunger bar, and eventually you will start starving. So there is potential for you to die. I mean, it would happen beyond like a 10-hour to 15-hour AFK session, but it is possible. So I wanted to add a little bit of a change to the farm for that, so that the player is far enough away that they are not affected by the explosion from the wither, and they can effectively AFK forever without worrying about dying. So we have this ender chest here for a couple reasons. One, because it's not a full block and it allows the player to place the soul sand directly in front of the piston. And two, because when the player's AFK, they're going to be sitting here holding down right click. And once the wither spawns, this piston is actually going to stop pushing the soul sand, so we don't want the player placing soul sand blocks everywhere. One last bit about this piston is that we do need it to reset once the wither dies, and the way that we accomplish this is from this redstone line right here. So that is connected to a comparator, which is taking a signal from this hopper right here. So when the nether star passes through that hopper, the comparator activates, and the piston pushes one more time and allows the player to start placing soul sand once again. So here is an AFK session that I did with this farm in survival. So as you can see, the player is AFKing right there. This dispenser system is activated. All of the soul sand is being dispensed directly behind the player. So once they place some of the soul sand, their inventory is replenished. Essentially, you would want one space in your inventory for soul sand, and then the rest of your inventory filled up with some other random item. So as you can see right here, the wither is essentially dying from entity cramming damage. Eventually they will die, the nether star will be collected, and you can see that the soul sand is then placed again by the player, and the next wither will spawn. Let's see if we can see that in action right over here. Once this wither dies, we kind of missed it. It was pretty quick. This is a really speedy replay. Let's see if we can see the player actually placing down the soul sand. It's too quick, actually. You can't really see it, but essentially this farm works wonders. So last but not least, the rates of this farm. With this farm, you can get about 83 to 90 nether stars per hour, essentially depending on the lag from your server or the world that you're playing on. So that's all she wrote. If you guys have any questions, or you noticed a way that the farm can be improved, or a potential issue with the farm, please leave them down in the comment section. If you guys enjoyed this, please do not hesitate to hit that thumbs up. If you want a full tutorial on how to build this farm, then leave a comment down below with your request for the tutorial. If we get enough interest, then maybe I'll make a full block tutorial for this farm. If you guys really enjoyed this and are looking forward to future videos, then hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications. I release news videos every single week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it, and take care. Bye bye.